Luke Mitchell had spent years serving the force, patrolling the streets with his most trusted partner, Rex, a highly trained German shepherd. Together they had chased down criminals, uncovered hidden narcotics, and faced life-threatening situations. But now, after Rex's well-earned retirement, Luke wanted nothing more than to settle into a quiet, peaceful life. That's why he chose Willow Creek Estates, an upscale, picture-perfect neighborhood. Manicured lawns, pristine sidewalks, and the kind of place where everyone waved at each other, even if they didn't mean it. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a place where he and Rex could finally relax. But what Luke didn't know was that this seemingly perfect community had a hidden force of its own, a woman who ruled it with an iron fist. Karen Simmons, the HOA president. A woman who didn't just enforce the rules, she was the rules. And the moment she saw Rex, she had already made up her mind. Luke noticed it right away. The way Karen's eyes narrowed as she saw Rex trotting beside him. The disapproving shake of her head. The polite yet forced smile that barely hid the judgment underneath. It was subtle, but Luke had spent years reading people. He knew trouble when he saw it. Sure enough, at the community welcome meeting, Karen made an announcement. "Just a friendly reminder, folks. All pets must comply with HOA regulations. No aggressive breeds, no excessive barking, and absolutely no threats to our peaceful environment." Her eyes flickered toward Luke for just a second, long enough to send a message. This wasn't just a general reminder. This was aimed directly at him. Luke exhaled slowly, glancing down at Rex, who sat calmly by his side, completely unaware that he had just become public enemy number one. This was supposed to be a new beginning. But now, Luke had a sinking feeling. This wasn't just about rules. This was about power. And Karen had just made it her mission to get rid of Rex, no matter what it took. What she didn't know, however, was that Luke had faced much worse than HOA complaints, and he sure as hell wasn't about to back down. This neighborhood was about to become a battleground. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. All right, let's keep going. Luke had barely started settling into his new home when the first sign of trouble arrived. A neatly folded letter in his mailbox, stamped with the official Willow Creek Estates HOA seal. The kind of letter that didn't just ask for compliance, it demanded it. He tore it open and scanned the contents. Notice of HOA violation resident. Luke Mitchell. Violation, aggressive animal action. Required immediate removal or relocation. Luke let out a humorless chuckle. Aggressive? Rex was many things. Loyal, disciplined, protective, but aggressive? Not a chance. He had spent years on the force alongside Luke, trained to respond with precision, never acting unless given a command. Rex wasn't some wild, unpredictable animal. He was a retired hero. Still, Luke wasn't the kind of guy to jump to conclusions. Maybe this was a misunderstanding. Maybe some neighbor had seen Rex and gotten nervous. He decided to take the diplomatic route. Later that afternoon, he found Karen standing in her perfectly landscaped front yard, talking to another board member. As he approached, her expression tightened, as if she had been expecting him. "Afternoon? Karen." Luke kept his tone neutral, holding up the letter. "Got this in the mail today. Thought I'd clear up any misunderstandings." Karen gave a polite but tight-lipped smile. "No misunderstanding, Mr. Luke. We've received complaints about your large dog. A few residents feel uncomfortable." Luke raised an eyebrow. "Uncomfortable? Rex hasn't done anything." Karen folded her arms, her expression unwavering. "It's not about what he's done. It's about what he could do. Our HOA has strict policies against aggressive breeds, and German Shepherds are considered high risk." Luke exhaled sharply, keeping his temper in check. "Karen, Rex isn't just any dog. He's a retired police K9. He's better trained than half the people walking around this neighborhood. Karen's eyes flickered, but her stance didn't change. Rules are rules, Mr. Luke. If we make an exception for you, we have to make one for everyone. I trust you'll take the appropriate action. And just like that, she turned away, ending the conversation as if it was already settled. Luke stood there for a moment, fists clenching at his sides. Something about this felt personal. She wasn't just enforcing HOA rules, she was targeting him. And now Luke had to find out why. Luke knew something wasn't right. Karen wasn't just following the rules, she was weaponizing them. The way she had dismissed him so easily, the way she had already made up her mind about Rex before he had even done anything. It didn't sit well with him. And Luke had spent too many years as an officer to ignore his instincts, so he started digging. The first clue came from Mrs. Thompson, an elderly neighbor who had lived in Willow Creek Estates for over a decade. She had been watching Rex with curiosity as Luke walked by one afternoon, her gaze warm and knowing. "You know," she mused, lowering her voice, "this isn't the first time Karen's tried to run someone out over a dog." Luke stopped. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Thompson sighed, glancing around as if making sure no one was listening. "About 5 years ago, a woman named Lydia had a Doberman. Sweet dog, well-trained. Karen launched a whole campaign against her. Claimed the dog was dangerous, pushed for new rules, even got the board to vote on it. And?" Luke asked, already sensing where this was going. Mrs. Thompson smirked. "Lydia fought back, hired a lawyer, proved that Karen was targeting her unfairly. Karen lost that battle, miserably, but she hated it. Ever since then, she's been more careful. She doesn't push unless she thinks she can win." Luke filed that away. Karen had a history of trying to get rid of certain dogs. But why? A deeper search led him to the second piece of the puzzle. An old neighborhood newsletter buried in the archives online. A small, almost forgotten mention in the community safety section. Following an unfortunate incident involving an aggressive pet, the HOA reminds residents to follow leash laws and adhere to community pet regulations. Luke frowned, then cross-referenced the date with public records. And there it was, Karen's son had been bitten by a dog years ago. Not a trained police dog, not a service animal, but an untrained pet from a negligent owner. It didn't take much to connect the dots. Karen wasn't just enforcing HOA rules, she was driven by something deeper. A personal vendetta, masked behind community safety. But now Luke had proof. Proof that Karen wasn't enforcing the rules equally. Proof that she had a history of targeting people unfairly. And if she thought he was just going to roll over and let her take Rex away, she was dead wrong. The night was still. Too still. Luke had always been a light sleeper, a habit formed from years of police work. But tonight, it wasn't his instincts that woke him. It was Rex. A low, guttural growl rumbled from the foot of the bed. Not the kind of restless noise dogs make in their sleep. No, this was different. This was a warning. Luke sat up instantly, his senses sharpening. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. Rex was already on his feet, ears perked, body tense. He was staring toward the window, eyes locked on something outside. Luke slid out of bed and moved toward the blinds, carefully parting them just enough to get a look. His pulse spiked. A shadowy figure was moving across the backyard. Karen's backyard. Luke didn't waste time. Years of training kicked in as he grabbed his firearm from the bedside drawer and clipped his badge to his waistband. He didn't know what he was dealing with yet, but if there was one thing he had learned in his career, it was this. When a dog like Rex sounded the alarm, you listened. Moving quickly and silently, Luke slipped out the back door, Rex right at his side. The cool night air sent a chill down his spine as he crept through the yard, keeping low. The figure was still there, now crouched near Karen's back door, fiddling with something. A lockpick, breaking and entering. Luke exhaled slowly. his grip tightening around his weapon. He had seen enough. Freeze! His voice cut through the night like a whip. The intruder jerked up in panic, but before he could make a run for it, Rex lunged. The German Shepherd moved like lightning, closing the distance in seconds. His powerful jaws clamped around the man's forearm, pinning him to the ground with a sharp yelp of pain. The intruder struggled, but it was useless. Rex had been trained for this. One wrong move, and the pressure would increase, but not enough to break the skin. That was the difference between a trained K9 and an ordinary dog. Luke approached, gun still raised. "You picked the wrong neighborhood, buddy." By the time the police arrived, Luke had already identified the man, a wanted criminal with a history of burglarizing upscale homes. The officers cuffed him, exchanging nods with Luke, impressed by his and Rex's quick response. And Karen? She stood on her porch, wrapped in a silk robe, eyes wide with shock, as she realized what had almost happened. She had spent weeks trying to get rid of Rex, but tonight he was the only reason she was safe. The flashing red and blue lights painted the quiet suburban street in pulses of urgency. Officers secured the scene, loading the handcuffed burglar into the back of a patrol car. Luke stood with his arms crossed, watching as Rex sat obediently by his side, panting lightly but otherwise calm. It should have been the end of it. A clear-cut case of a K9 officer and his retired partner stopping a criminal in action. But Karen Simmons had other ideas. She stormed down her front steps, silk robe clutched tightly around her as she jabbed a finger at Luke. This is exactly what I was afraid of." Her voice wavered between outrage and self-righteous fury. Luke frowned. "Excuse me," she turned to the officers. "Did you see that beast? He attacked that man without provocation. What if it had been a resident instead? A child? One of..." The officers, a younger guy Luke recognized from the precinct, blinked in disbelief. "Ma'am, that man is a convicted burglar. He was breaking into your house." Karen scoffed. "That's not the point. The point is that dog is dangerous. He shouldn't be here in the first place. And now he's attacking people?" Luke could hardly believe what he was hearing. His jaw tightened as he pulled out his phone, tapping a few buttons before holding it up. "Good thing I have security cameras." A flicker of hesitation crossed Karen's face, but she quickly masked it with defiance. Luke played the footage, and there it was, crystal clear. The intruder sneaking around her yard. Luke command. Rex's perfectly executed takedown. No aggression, no loss of control. Just pure, disciplined action. The officer nodded in approval. "That's a textbook K9 takedown." Completely by the book. Karen's lips thinned, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. "I don't care what the footage shows. That dog is a liability. This community has rules, and I'll be calling an HOA emergency meeting first thing in the morning. We'll put this to a vote. Rex must go." Luke took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. He had dealt with criminals, liars, and manipulators his whole career. He knew Karen wasn't backing down, not because she believed she was right, but because she couldn't stand being wrong. She had tried to paint Rex as a threat, and now, even when faced with the truth, she was willing to twist the narrative to save face. But what Karen didn't realize was that Luke wasn't the kind of man to back down either. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Luke had faced his fair share of liars in his career. Suspects who would spin wild stories to get out of trouble. Criminals who thought they were smarter than the system. Karen Simmons? She was no different. But the thing about people like Karen? They always thought they were untouchable, that the rules applied to everyone but them. And Luke was about to prove just that. After Karen's outrageous demand for an emergency HOA meeting, Luke knew he couldn't just show up and argue his case. Karen had already stacked the deck against him, manipulating residents into believing Rex was a ticking time bomb, so Luke did what he did best. He investigated. It didn't take long to find the cracks in Karen's carefully controlled empire. HOA records weren't exactly top-secret documents, and with a little digging, Luke found exactly what he was looking for. Unauthorized events, financial discrepancies, community violations she had ignored for certain preferred residents, while cracking down hard on others. One particular discovery made him smirk. Karen had hosted a massive 4th of July party last year, complete with fireworks, live music, and an open bar. The problem? The HOA strictly prohibited large gatherings without board approval. And Karen? She had never gotten approval. The HOA meeting was packed. Word had spread quickly about Rex's supposed danger, and the room was filled with concerned homeowners, murmuring amongst themselves. Karen sat at the front, radiating smug authority as she cleared her throat. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that community safety is our top priority. We must make a responsible decision regarding aggressive animals in our neighborhood. Luke stood up. Actually, Karen, before we discuss my dog, maybe we should talk about your violations. Silence. Karen blinked. Excuse me? Luke held up a folder. HOA records. Turns out you've been breaking the same rules you so aggressively enforce. He flipped open a page. Let's start with last year's 4th of July party. You threw an event with over 50 guests, live entertainment, and fireworks, without board approval. According to HOA regulations, that's a clear violation. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's face paled. Luke wasn't done. He turned another page. And let's not forget how you ignored multiple complaints about noise disturbances from your friends' houses, while immediately fining other residents for minor infractions. A man in the crowd, a middle-aged homeowner, stood up. Wait, you fined me last year for having my music on too loud, but you ignored the Johnsons when they threw that huge wedding party? Karen sputtered. That's different? Luke raised an eyebrow. Is it? Or are you just selectively enforcing rules when it benefits you? More murmurs, heads nodding. Luke delivered the final blow. You've been abusing your power, Karen. And now when my dog, the same dog who just saved your home, doesn't fit into your personal vendetta, you expect everyone to fall in line? Karen opened her mouth to protest, but she didn't have an argument anymore. The room had turned against her. A woman on the board cleared her throat. I think it's time we reconsider who should be making the rules in this community. The tide had shifted, and Karen knew it. She had spent years controlling this neighborhood. But now, her reign was coming to an end. The room was silent. Karen sat stiffly in her chair, her usual air of superiority crumbling under the weight of the evidence Luke had just presented. The murmurs of the residents grew louder, and for the first time, Karen Simmons, the woman who had ruled Willow Creek, estates like a queen, looked nervous. But Luke wasn't finished. He reached into his folder and pulled out a final document. Since we're talking about rules, let's talk about the law. Karen scoffed, attempting to regain control. Oh, please, Luke. HOA regulations are clear. The board has the right to, not in this case. Luke's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it now. He held up the paper for everyone to see. This is Rex's official K-9 certification. He's a retired police service animal, and according to federal law, no HOA can legally ban or restrict a working or retired K-9 from a residence. Period. A hush fell over the room. Luke turned to the HOA's legal representative, a man who had been sitting quietly in the corner, observing everything. I assume you already knew that, right? The lawyer cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. Yes, that is correct. HOAs cannot override federal protections for retired service animals. If this went to court, Mr. Luke would win. Easily. Karen's face flushed a deep red. That's ridiculous. This is our community. We should be able to... The woman sitting next to her on the HOA board leaned forward. Karen, stop! Karen's mouth snapped shut. The board member shook her head. You've lied to us. You selectively enforced rules. You ignored violations from your friends. And now you tried to illegally remove a police dog from his home? Enough is enough. The murmurs in the crowd turned into voices of agreement. A man near the back called out, I say we take a vote. Another woman added, Yeah, let's vote on her instead of Rex. Karen's hands clenched into fists. You can't do this, Luke tilted his head. Rules are rules. And just like that, the HOA board took an impromptu vote. One by one, hands shot up. By the end of it, the verdict was clear. Karen Simmons was officially removed as HOA president. She stood there shaking with rage, but there was nothing left to say. She had lost. Luke gave Rex a pat on the head. Looks like you're staying, buddy. And as the meeting ended, Luke couldn't help but smile. Justice had been served. A week after Karen's dramatic downfall, things in Willow Creek Estates had already begun to change. The tense, fearful atmosphere she had cultivated was fading, replaced by something the neighborhood hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. With Karen gone, the HOA wasted no time in revising the outdated pet policy. The new president, a level-headed woman named Diane, made sure of it. It's about fairness, she had said at the meeting. Dogs like Rex, well-trained, disciplined, and part of this community, deserve to stay. The motion passed unanimously. Luke couldn't help but smirk as he leaned back in his patio chair, sipping his morning coffee. Rex lay stretched out. At his feet, his thick fur warmed by the morning sun. For the first time since moving in, Luke truly felt at home. No more surprise notices. No more ridiculous complaints. No more Karen. Rex let out a deep, contented sigh, his ears twitching slightly at the distant sound of birds chirping. Even in retirement, he remained ever watchful, a silent guardian at Luke's side. Luke reached down, running a hand through Rex's fur. Looks like we won, buddy. Rex's tail thumped lazily against the wooden deck. Luke smiled. Justice had been served. And loyalty, true loyalty, had prevailed. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the next part, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated. See you in the next one. Your support means the world.